Hello, everybody. This is Peter Cipcowski, and I'm happy to introduce another segment in a series of conversations with Roe Jan area community leaders. And today I'm delighted to have a conversation with Lesley Doyel, who is the president of the Roeliff Jansen Historical Society. Hi, Lesley.
Hi, how are you, Peter? Thank you
Doing
for
well.
having me.
Oh, you bet. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to chat with you. You've been on our list, and I'm glad I finally nabbed you.
Great. Well, I'm delighted to be nabbed.
Let's start. You have a very interesting background, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your roots, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you came to Copake, where you now live.
Sure. My background, I'm a native New Yorker, a native of Manhattan. And my background is I grew up in the city, so museums were part of my life, and my parents were very involved in taking me to them frequently. And so that was kind of a natural, and I ended up getting a degree in art history from NYU. That was followed by a graduate degree in museum education. So I just can't stay away from museums, it seems. And I was lucky enough to do an internship at the Metropolitan Museum and to work at the Cloisters Museum. And then I was very lucky to land a job in art history at Parsons School of Design, where I was program director of something called the Liberal Arts Interactive Arts Education. So it provided students with the chance to work in traditional media as they studied art history. So they weren't just sitting there watching slides. We got them out into a variety of museums. They got their hands dirty, so to speak. And we also had a program of global special events. So they were introduced to taiko drumming and Nigerian storytelling and Native American storytelling and songs of the 6 Celtic nations. So it was a really very wonderful thing to have been involved with for a long, long time.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It was very comprehensive and terrific, and it really made a huge impact on students. And I became a fresco painter myself, and I did a lot of work in manuscript illumination, and eventually ended up becoming very involved in the New York preservation scene, and which is at a very dire point in its history at this point, because there's so much development there. So I was the president of something called Cipcowski for about 7 years, which involved a lot of history. And then from there, I ended up teaching a class that I still teach. Unfortunately, it's on hiatus right now, but it's called Hands-on History, and it's for public school kids, and it's about local history. So,
oh, sign me up for that, Lesley.
It is a wonderful class, and thank you.
How did you discover Copake?
So we discovered Copake really through my husband, Nick Fritsch, who was also on the board of the Roe Jan Historical Society. And he used to come to Sheffield to visit his grandmother, who had a lovely house that still stands there, and his cousins and his aunt lived in Hillsdale. And his uncle, just by way of a little trivia, was James Agee, the writer who is, I understand, still in Hillsdale.
Yes,
and so when we started, when we felt like we could look for a house, a property, we thought, wow, that area is terrific, and you can be in Massachusetts and Connecticut very rapidly. And we just started looking around and fell in love with the house that we live in on Farm Road, which is a kid house from 1940 that was built by Lou Kaufman, who started the pharmacy in Copake. So it has its own history. And that's what really brought us here, and all the cultural things that you can do, the museums, the historical societies, also the walks, nature. We have a dog that we walk every day, at least twice a day, on very long walks. So we just fell in love with every aspect of it.
What was your awareness level of the Roeliff Jansen Historical Society in the time before you got deeply involved like you are now?
Well, it's interesting because I think wherever we live, we are very interested in the history of the place. So we gravitated very naturally to the ironworks and heard Jim Mackin speak about the ironworks and the machine room, and would bring friends there and would naturally go to visit the Historical Society. So many of the exhibits, which we loved, and learned so much about the area. And of course, fell in love with St. John in the Wilderness as well. So that little enclave of cultural and historical wonderments has always been a draw for us. So
it's a very special place,
it sure is.
that little nook
It
nestled in
is.
Copic
It is
Falls.
indeed.
And the Roeliff Jansen Historical Society is interested in sort of the larger Roe Jan community, right?
That's right.
Do you mind chatting a little bit about your sense of the mission of the society in the community?
So I believe the mission is to endeavoring to carry this on along with a wonderful board that exists. And we collect archives, we collect objects. It's not a month goes by that an object doesn't arrive to be added to the collection. People come to the museum and bring things to add to the collection. So it's certainly to record the past and preserve objects of the past. And that's very much what we see in terms of exhibits, getting the, putting these things on view for people to see. And what's very exciting, we've tried to really maintain the 5 towns. We don't want it to become Copic Falls centric. We really tried to, like in last summer's show, we really tried to bring in all of the towns, and in fact, had an homage to Roeliff Jansen himself, the man and his history, and his incredible wife, Anneke Jans, and to really try to explain that our area is tied together by the Roe Jan River. So I definitely see that as part of the mission. And what we were going to, I will wait for you to ask me about this, but that figures very heavily into the show that we had planned for this coming summer, was to be all inclusive.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll get to that. And before we talk about how the pandemic has impacted the society, I'd love to understand a little bit more about your belief in local history and the power of the story.
I think that, well, a little anecdote here is that we had 2 summers ago, my first summer with the society, we had a show called Collectors and Collections, which I think you had initiated as past president. And some children came in one day. And they said, we never came in before. I said, come in, please. And they said, we've never come in before because we were kind of scared. And I was like, well, you needn't be, because this is your museum. This museum is about you and your lives and the histories of your families and the buildings. So it's really a place that I would love for you to feel. We all want you to feel welcome here and to come in here. So I think it's the last 2 summers that I've been involved, I think people have just been so excited to walk in and see objects from Mike Fallon's collection or things from the Van Dusen collection, which was recently donated, and to know that it's for them and that they recognize things. And as somebody who's not from the area, but loves the area, I have learned so much from the people who come into the museum. That was the same was true last year when we did the hidden history of the Roe Jan area. And I just learned so much and was very touched when people would, bring in little mementos. And we actually had people who had met Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was one of the sections, and the time that he spent both in Copic Falls and then Mount Washington. And they would come in and say, I actually met him. And I sat with him at the Taconic Wayside Inn. My father was the local postmaster, and this was something that I will treasure. So it's been really both an experience of learning from and helping to teach about. So we're hoping that people feel that way about the society.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Are there some challenges that you face just generally as an historical society, pandemic aside, that you'd like to talk about? And the things that you're trying to work on overall with your board?
I think one of the things that we're trying to work on is to be more in touch with other towns in the area. That I see as a major challenge. And I would like to also, one of the learning curves that I've had is to try to figure out the difference between the Historical Society and town historians, for instance. And that's been interesting because, if I may say so, they have seemed a little bit separate. And I would really love to work more closely with the historians from the 5 towns, which are, I should repeat, which are, help me out here, Ancram, Hillsdale, Taconic, Gallatin, and Copic. So right. I think having a much stronger connection with the historians who are the repository of all of this memory and, and history and archives. And that's probably the source that the Historical Society really grew out of.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And
In
some
the
of
fall.
our, that's right. And some of our town historians are as missionary about local history as the society is, and there ought to be more integration.
So I think that that's something that I see as a challenge that I'd like to meet. And I think the board shares this. We've become recently members of something called the Columbia County History Group, which was initiated. I think there have been a number of these over the years, but it was reinitiated by Tom Moreland of Austerlitz. So it has brought us all together, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to meet people who have just this incredible quantity of knowledge about the area.
Fantastic, that's fantastic. Now, the society has been around since 1974, I believe, and in its current location since the very early 80s, I believe. But space, I know, is an issue. Like, how are you doing with that? You've got growing archives.
Yes, we do, indeed. And space is a major, I'm glad you brought that up, because space is a major concern. So I hope anybody who's listening to this and has some extra space. So we have to be very careful with the way in which things are stored. And we have a wonderful storage space that is climate controlled. We also have, thanks to all of the people who have donated and given money and time, we have air conditioning so that objects are also preserved and kept at a proper temperature throughout the summer months. So space is definitely something that we would welcome the opportunity to share, to put some of our archives or some of the less perishable things in other spaces, because it's getting small, or indeed perhaps at some point to enlarge that space would be another way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, glad to put that out there. I know space is a priority. And you want to keep the main hall open for exhibits and programming and so on.
So that's, that's every inch of that space is usable space and it's a terrific space.
Isn't it?
It is just a magical space, and it's got beautiful light through the lancet windows. And we also have the original pews that are there from the spring through through the fall until the spring. So that enables us to have audiences to come to at least 3 presentations that we do every semester, I want to say, but every spring. That's how I think. Once an academic, always an academic.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And then the pews come out, and we use the entire museum as exhibition space in the summer.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, you don't have the original windows, because those windows were broken by kids like me in the 60s and 70s when the building was pretty much abandoned. But I'm not claiming responsibility for that. But I grew up.
But I'll remember that.
Tell me, let's talk about your programming. Lesley, you have brought a style and an energy and a pursuit of just factual history to the narrative that you guys present at this society. What's happening now? What does the road ahead look like for you for the rest of 2020?
So the show that we have been planning for the last year is something called Revived in Wood, Greek and Gothic Revival Churches of the Roe Jan region. And this is about 18 churches, wooden churches that were built over period of time that reflect both Gothic and Greek Revival architecture. The inspiration from this came from Arthur Baker's wonderful book published by the Columbia County Historical Society called The Wooden Churches of Columbia County. So we thought we would, and we met with Arthur, who was very supportive of this idea, and we decided that we would do I think there are about 18 churches that are left in the Roe Jan region, and we were going to feature them, talk about the different movements that were behind the architecture, the Greek Revival being a reflection of the burgeoning republic of the early 19th century and reflecting symmetry and solidity, whereas the Gothic really, when people became more comfortable with nature, they embraced it. And Gothic architecture really shows the sort of the organic and the fluid, floral aspects of nature. So those two contrast, and they really are statements about people's feelings about their society, and also not only about the architecture, but the tools that enabled, wonderful spirals to be created, or, solid geometric shapes. So we were going to borrow things from a number of people in the area. And of course, St. John in the Wilderness is a special feature because it was designed by a known architect. Most of them were anonymous, as it happens, but a very well-known architect, Richard Upjohn, who is probably best known for having designed the Trinity Church in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan on Wall Street. So we were going to do this, but also to talk about the fact that churches are where the community gathers and where the community takes a lot of strength. During times of pandemic, indeed, it would have been a place of refuge and a place of help and solace, certainly. So anyway, we thought we're very excited about this and have gotten a lot of support. And we decided, instead of diluting it or canceling it, that we would postpone until the following summer, the summer of 2021. And we decided to include the 2 programs that were associated with this that will be given by Dale Peterson of St. John in the Wilderness. He's going to speak about Richard Upjohn and his impact on church architecture. And then also by your friend, David Gallagher, who's going to talk about Gothic revival. So we decided to just move the entire thing till next spring and summer. We do, however, have another exciting event that we'll try to do in the late summer or the fall, and that is that we got a Pomeroy historic marker that was granted by the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. So they're willing to do the unveiling virtually, or we'd like to wait until people can actually come, but again, we don't know. So, but those are some exciting things that we have in the offing.
Wonderful. Tell us more about the marker. Where will the marker stand and what will it say? What does it commemorate?
It will just commemorate the fact that we were entered into the National Register of Historic Buildings in 2012. And it will be, if you're facing the Historical Society, it will be to the left side in front of the beautiful holly bush.
That's great.
So you'll be able to see it from Miles Road as well as from the front of the museum.
That's great. That's overdue. Thank you so much for getting that to happen. Wonderful.
And I thank the entire board, and Richard Barton was very instrumental in getting this.
Dick Barton is the man of action behind the scenes, always.
Incredible. It's an incredible board. Everybody. Robin Bruce is having it installed, and anyway, so everybody
Wonderful.
does their part.
That's great. That's great. I know you've got some other things planned, a new website or some features on the website that I'd love for you to introduce today.
Sure. So we have actually created a new website on the Wix program, which is easier to use, easier for non-techies. But I think it reflects the history. It has what is referred to as Eleanor's Blue in the type, which we had to maintain. And we're just working feverishly and putting much more of the collection onto the website and stories behind the collection. And because we've gotten some very interesting additions. For instance, last summer for the show, the Hidden History of the Roe Jan region, we had a section on tectonic baskets and the last basket maker, Elizabeth Proper, who many people have encountered, so many people that knew her and have baskets from her, and we had a display, but we had written for permission to use a segment of a documentary that was by Jack and Helen Ofield called The Last Basket Maker, and it was made in the early 70s. Anyway, they were a little formal at first, and they said, you must send us pictures of the surrounding exhibition in addition to how you're using the film. And this was the first year, I believe, that we had, last summer was the first time that multimedia was used in an exhibit. So that was very exciting. So we sent the photographs, we sent the information, the text that was used to accompany the Last Basket Maker film. And we got such an incredible letter back from Jack and Helen saying, this has made us so happy that we are going to give you the photographs that Jack took, and that Helen took of Jack with Elizabeth and her daughter, Mary Ann. So that has been a really nice byproduct of last summer's show. And I have been in touch with Marianne, Elizabeth's daughter, sent her the photographs. So she's ecstatic and has joined the Historical Society. So that's one of the very nice stories. So we're trying to put all of these things on the website for people to enjoy and to learn from.
That's sensational. Congratulations. That's really exciting.
Very exciting.
And you'll have, with the pandemic and the uncertainty of the months ahead, time to flesh this out, I would imagine.
Indeed. So that is the one good thing about this. And you asked about our response to the pandemic. Since we can't be open, or we've chosen not to be open this summer, what we're doing is we're creating a section of the website that's called Pandemics, Past and Present, Remembering the Resilience of the Roe Jan Region. And with this section, which will probably be launched tomorrow, we're very excited about it, and it couches the pandemic in history, and certainly the history of Columbia County itself, because of New York City and the city of Hudson being port cities and people traveling. It has been very hard hit by past pandemics and epidemics as well. So we are not only doing this, but following your lead, Peter, and the lead of the New York State, the State Museum of New York, the Historical Society down in the city. We're also creating a blog that will be, so people can enter their observations, their feelings, their thoughts, and their experiences about the current pandemic. And we're also going to have a section about past pandemics as well. So people might remember polio, for instance, the scourge of Lyme's disease, which is referred to as an epidemic. Lots of people, we have a very high rate of Lyme disease in this county. The Spanish flu. We all have memories probably of or many of us, I should say, many of us older folks have memories of our parents and grandparents remembering it. So I think that's very exciting. So you can you'll be able to access the blog via Facebook and also on the website. And we will be sending out a newsletter alerting everybody to this.
Fantastic. So, and the website, of course, is Roeliff Jansen HS for historicalsociety.org. Lesley, that's so interesting, and maybe a different conversation, but do we have data, do we know, in addition to anecdotal evidence, that folks would escape the populated areas and come up here even earlier in the 20th century?
Absolutely. So, yeah. So we found a number of articles in past issues of the Columbia County Historical Society's publication, and including one by, if I may, Columbia County in the Time of Cholera. And the author...
When was that published?
So this was from 2015, and it records a number of, so it's by Mary Faherty Sansarek, and it's wonderful documentation of the fact that New York, even in the 1700s, and it's very, not New York and America, and especially New York City and Columbia County, because of the nature of the, being devoted to trade and commerce, and ships were coming in from all over the world, and people were flooding in all the time at both port cities, that people would, naturally carry these, smallpox, yellow fever, typhoid, tuberculosis. All of these things were, became very, very widespread. Isolation was one of the major ways of dealing with them, because they didn't have medicines. They didn't really understand the nature of something like cholera, which was largely waterborne.
Right.
So, and then people, of course, escaping. I knew, this is a little bit of the New York history. I knew that people would in the summertime, they would leave. If they could possibly afford it, they would go. No
air conditioning, and we know that.
Yeah, no air conditioning, so they would leave the city. And that was the time when, yes, right, exactly.
The Mount Washington House and the Copic Inn and the Taconic Wayside Inn, and all these little houses or inns became boarding houses for summer residents who wanted to escape the heat. And I guess they brought the disease with them in the case of pandemics. Or
indeed escape the mosquitoes that, carried a lot of diseases. So it's been fascinating, and it has been, so history is repeating itself in many terrible ways.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lesley, for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to share about the society, or any other messages that you need to share with us before we wrap this up?
Well, we just, I'm personally thrilled. The board is, very excited about this interview, and I thank you for the opportunity. And please watch for the newsletter giving details of the upcoming blog and of pandemics past and present. And we really hope people will participate, because today's experience and what you write today will become tomorrow's history. So it's very, very, very important.
And if you're not currently a member of the Roeliff Jansen Historical Society, go to roeliffjansenhs.org and sign up for the newsletter and become a member. I'm channeling my Robin Bruce right now.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Lesley, thank you so much for chatting with me. Thank you for your leadership at the Society and for coming into the community and celebrating it in every possible way. So.
Thank you so much, and I stand on your shoulders.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.